Perfect. Okay, so good morning, everyone. We are starting our first session of UGIH COP30 dialogue here in the beautiful city of Belém. Let me start by thanking the government of Brazil for hosting us here at COP30. My name is Nitin Arora. I'm the lead of the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub, an initiative of UNFCCC Secretariat that started at COP26 in Glasgow with an objective to promote and facilitate development of new climate and sustainable solutions and deployment of existing solutions at scale. This particular session will talk about strategic global mobilization of investment for development and climate, launching a world investment plan. And we have here our panelists moderated by Ketan, Patel. So I'll not take much time and hand it over to Ketan for moderating this panel discussion. Over to you, Ketan.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to lead this session, opening UNFCCC at COP30. Thank you very much, Nitin. Thank you also for your colleagues, and especially for Masamba. I'm Ketan Patel. I'm the chairman of Force for Good and the Force for Good Foundation, the CEO of Greater Pacific Capital, and an executive director for the World Academy of Art and Science. Apologies that this group could not assemble in person this year. However, our message is an important one. We begin very briefly with the launch of an important and unique piece of work that Force for Good has produced on how capital can be mobilized at scale with the launch of a plan that encompasses the world that invests profitably in building the assets that will propel the world forward. We know, all of us, that there has been some controversy around whether it is climate or development, but we all know it's and, not or. They're intertwined, and we all know they both need to be addressed, of course. So it, in some ways, doesn't really matter if one believes in climate change or prefers to think of it as a long cyclical process, or whether we think it's just pollution or environmental damage. In some ways, the IPCC report has been very clear, drawing on the leading scientists around the world, that the world will cross 2 degrees centigrade, then 2.5, and most likely 3 in this century. The implications, of course, are profound. Temperature, therefore, will rise and the ice will melt. The seas are set to rise. Coastal cities, therefore, flood. The deserts are expanding. Forests will burn, and the land will not be able to produce food where we do today. Countries will have to shift across borders. It makes the weather unbearable in the global south, which means they will migrate in large numbers. People will migrate to the north, and the north will become economically and politically unstable. So in some ways, it doesn't really matter what we believe. We will have to cap pollution and in some ways address climate. We will have to build the protections, build the different ways to grow the food, and in different places. We will need to protect the forests, and we will need to make the south livable and vibrant, and reinvigorate the economies of the north too, and address the needs of the poor in rich and poor countries. And it's true that to do that, we would have to raise the development standards of the world to a more bearable level for everybody. And whether we call that the SDGs or something else, it probably doesn't really matter. And our report shows that this can all be done profitably. And in this historic transition, it's important that it is done profitably. And as digital technology reaches every part of the world, every human being becomes an asset that can be identified and in some ways monetized is a horrible word, but monetized in the sense that they are a profitable, vibrant, value-adding asset for the rest of the world. That's, of course, frightening in some ways, no doubt, but a massive opportunity. And it is technology, therefore, that provides us the opportunity to raise everybody. In summary, our report says that the world, if it chose to take the IPCC report and address all its challenges, take the Sustainable Development Goals and address all the challenges of raising the world, it would build and invest approximately $125 trillion of assets. These are assets that encompass almost everything that we know. And it's things that we're used to building: energy, infrastructure, technology, education, seawalls, digital systems, and so on. 72% of that can be done profitably. 26% requires some innovation so that public spend can be invested alongside private capital, and 2% is invested in pure public good. But the big number is 72%. So the opportunity is immense for the world to create an investment boom like no other we've seen in history. And that really means that we stand at the edge of probably one of the most intense and exciting adventures in human history, where everything that we know today will change. Most of the things we rely on will be lost, and everything is to be gained by building something different and new. That's my launch and introduction in a few minutes to the World Investment Plan. It's available on forcegood.org. It has an enormous data package. It's a lengthy, detailed report, and it draws on much of the research and work of the world, and some of the people in this room too. I'm going to begin by briefly introducing a superb group of leaders that we pulled together for this opening panel. We have John Symonds, chairman of GSK, former chairman of HSBC PLC. He brings to us expertise, therefore, that's quite unique as a leader in healthcare and a leader in finance too. Phoebe Koundouri, she is a professor also at Cambridge and at Athens University, chair of Aphoria, chair of the SDSN Global Climate Hub 2. She brings a policy perspective and deep expertise in climate. John Miller, CEO of Integrated Media, former chairman and CEO of AOL, and he brings expertise on mobilization, media mobilization, and mobilizing people. Osvald Bjelland, founder and chairman of Origination, the Origination Foundation, formerly also of Xyntéo, and the founder of the Performance Theatre, and an expert really in enterprise building and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, your expertise and insights are going to be very valuable as we have this discussion. Let me kick off with the first round of questions, and I will pose that to you, John, to kick off, please. What do you see as the opportunity and the challenge to make really positive change in the world and to see that impact and see it funded? John Symonds, please.
Yeah, Ketan, thank you. Good morning, everybody. And Ketan, let me congratulate you on another truly outstanding piece of work. I think there are few examples, I think, of work of, this magnitude and comprehensiveness, that pulls all the issues together. So I think, well done. It's a major contribution. And I think what you describe is that, to solve climate, you've got to solve a lot of other problems as well. There are so many integrated aspects of this. And I think you are quite right that we should be looking at this as, not the elimination of the problem, but how do we solve it by creating opportunity. And I think that, really the three things that, that I see as going hand in hand, obviously, we do have to address climate in all the ways that you say, but there are two other what I call mega trends that sit alongside that. And I think are essential components to the solution. Number one is, health equality, access to medicine, and recognition that the world at the same time as is going through major climate shifts is also going through major demographic shifts as well. We know that in a very large part of the world, the population is aging and it is not being replaced. So populations are declining at the same point as we've got rapid expansion of populations, and this is creating a lot of big pressure for migration. Just by focusing on and I think health now is moving from the point of, well, we're really proud about increasing lifespan. It is now becoming clear that that's not enough without increasing health span. And around the world today, over $1 trillion per annum is lost through ill health and the loss of productivity that comes from health. So by bringing access to medicine, health equality in, alongside, climate, we're looking at the potential of creating economic and social capacity of an order of magnitude that we've not seen before. And I think, many governments now are starting to look at health as, not the cost of treating the sick, but how do we prevent and get this economic and social dividend. But the other trend is, as you mentioned, is technology. I think we now have the tools for, social inclusion and economic inclusion in a way that we've never conceived before. And I think that this is the pathway through which Africa and other nations can truly participate alongside the rest of the world, because technology has no boundaries. In my own very small case, as you know, my wife and I have a educational foundation in Uganda, and we've been able to take education from the 1950s, 10 years ago, to applying now the very advanced digitally based technology. So I think, these three vectors have to be brought together, and I think we have to think about new partnerships. What the Prince of Wales talked about over the weekend is the role and responsibility of business as convening, the role and responsibility of private capital. You are completely right in thinking that private capital now, has to be deployed at scale, but with a return. It is the only way that scale of capital is available. And if I just digress for 1 minute of, my own position at GSK, we set an ambition 5 years ago to improve the health of 2.5 billion people on Earth, which is, is close to a third of the world's population. We will achieve that in far less time, because we have sought partnerships with governments, we've sought partnerships with the supranational organization, we've deployed our products at scale, we've used technology to identify where people and risks are, and it's been a good investment. And I think that we have got to think about, as you're rightly saying, Ketan, we've got to think about this as new forms of partnership with both business and capital, but also that we've got to release the world's population to demand and support the journey that we're on. So I finish in a way of, I really want to be optimistic about this, because we now have the mechanisms to be able to achieve this. Technology is going to be not opportunity that is going to level opportunity around the world, and by doing so, engage 8 billion people to solve the world's problem, not just a few in the developed world. So I'll leave it there. I'm sure there's lots of things to come back to, but again, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this.
Thank you, John. I like that takeaway of you wanting to reach 2.5 billion people, and I know you well enough to know that you will raise that target successively until we reach everyone. Phoebe, would you mind going next, please? Because I know you as somebody who is a climate expert, but a humanist, and you don't divorce climate and the planet from the impact on humanity and the need to make sure that people are raised in the process. How do you see the opportunity, the challenge? Your work is deep. We don't need to, we don't need to question that. It's just, how do you see what insights do you have for us?
Well, thank you very much, Ketan. Thank you for having me in the launch of this very important and inspiring report. It is important because it showcases the way forward. Now, I'm a professor of economics. I'm a professor of economics that is dealing with both public and private goods. We have been quite successful in managing private goods within our markets, financial markets, economic markets. We have been disasters in managing public goods in these markets. In fact, anything that goes on in the space of public goods, local, national, international, global, is being, as a rule, left outside markets. And because it is outside markets, it does not signal its value that derives from scarcity. And as a result, it's being overexploited and mismanaged. And this is what happened with CO2 emissions. This is what happened with the resilience of ecosystems. This is what happened with healthcare. This is what happened with public infrastructures. This is what happened even with military infrastructures. But let me go back to what we can do about this. The job of finance is to bring the fruits of our technologies. And for example, think of AI engines, and think of the new Nobel Prizes in chemistry and physics, to the scientists that produce breakthroughs in protein folding and machine learning that offer prospects of drug development and so on. We have a lot of impressive technological advances, and the job of finance is to bring the fruits of these technological advances to the benefits of humanity, including, of course, the global south, but also the global north, where, as I said before, the management of public goods has not been efficient enough to at least hedge us for serious destruction and catastrophes. With regards to climate change, we know that it is defined as the increased frequency and severity of extreme climate events, including high-intensity typhoons, droughts, floods, heat waves, forest fires. And this increased frequency and intensity produces billions of costs all over the world in lost infrastructure, disruption of economic activity, but also loss of human life. We have powerful solutions. We have zero carbon energy. We have open source AI. We have precision agriculture. We have biodiversity conservation. And if we take the needed investments to bring these solutions to bear at the global scale, then we can definitely solve our problem. There is also more good news for finance. Economic development is a high return activity. This means that properly designed financial markets will channel the world's savings not only to high income countries that are already prosperous, but even more to the world's poorest countries, which have the prospects of rapid catching up economic advancements. And this is a process that we economists call economic convergence, and it is indeed the poorer countries that have the greater potential for growth and the higher potential for return on investment. So with properly functioning international financial markets and with institutional reforms in the less developed and emerging economies that allow reduction on investment risk, de-risking the interesting investments, then direct investment to economic, social, and environmental priorities can be actually introduced, and can also attract the pool of annual world savings, roughly 30 trillion per year, that is looking for interesting investments. Interesting investments exist not only in the global south, but also in the global south. However, the global south, the emerging economies, the less developed countries are experiencing a number of risks of default, the risk of corruption, risk of low capacity of the labor market to actually provide the skills and professions that are needed for the investment to really run, and also risk of underdeveloped, not robust institutions that can carry out the investment. So our job, and this is what we discuss in the UN Conference for Sustainable Financing in Seville, is to de-risk these projects in order to allow the flow of savings, but also private financing to be blended by public financing, financing that comes not only from budgets of governments, but also multilateral institutions, in order to actually make investments that are going to sustain the growth in the global south at levels that will provide the necessary both resources but also capacity building in order to produce growth in these countries. Number one investment, of course, is education. Education is the most serious step towards investment. Do you want me to wrap up?
Yes.
But then, but then it's,
I'm going to come back to you, don't worry.
Yeah, but then it's, of course, all that has to do with climate and ecosystem resilience, on which each and every economic activity, both consumption and production, are dependent on in a very high degree. In the second round, I'm going to talk a bit about debt relief, and I'm going to talk about ratings of countries as well, how we can facilitate by restructuring the global financial architecture in order to get that amount of public and private finance to re-engine growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you. John Miller. John, you have done something extraordinary a number of times now, where you have mobilized people en masse for a cause, and you understand deeply also how technology will reach people and engage them. What are your insights for us on how we make this change happen at scale to address the issues? And leaning on something that John Symonds said earlier too, without the individual being mobilized, we are leaving it in the hands of a far smaller group of institutions to get this done. You're muted, John.
Apologies. Thank you, Ketan, and thank you for your leadership in this report. And yes, I did hear John Symonds make that reference to individuals that I thought I might comment further on, because I think we've entered a period where, without general popular support for these types of initiatives, they just won't really happen in the way that we need them to happen. And on the one hand, social media has, because of the demos and other things, become the prevalent form of information gathering, information sharing at this point for people around the world. That has happened and will only continue from here. And on the one hand, it provides an extraordinary amount of access and inclusion, again, as John Symonds referred to earlier. But the other side of it, perhaps, is that the platforms themselves are not passive vessels. They play a role in how this information is gathered, disseminated, and how people react to it, what they see. So the platforms such as Meta, Facebook, TikTok, etc., again, are not passive vessels. They are active participants in this. And so we have both the opportunity, if you will, to reach more people than ever before and have those people's voices heard, for them to be active and for them to be involved. And at the same time, what they are presented with and what they react to forms a loop that reinforces all kinds of behaviors, and that the platforms do participate in and do amplify certain voices and certain reactions and behaviors. So in order to achieve the goal of an active, engaged population around the world in numbers that are meaningful and that influence the overall policy and investment possibilities that have been spoken about here, I think an understanding of mobilizing people and what that means today and through the mediums that occurs is ever more important. And what you were referring to a moment ago, Ketan, in my past, I've done these major events on a global scale, from Live 8 to many things with Global Citizen, Live Earth. And those have been spikes, if you will, in interest and attention from literally billions of people, and reached billions of people around the world. And in some cases had meaningful effects. For Live 8, we got $55 billion in debt relief pledged to Africa. And Phoebe, I know you're going to speak more about debt in a moment, but that was one of the milestones in that regard a few years back. And so those events can have real impact at a moment in time. The question becomes, how do you translate that momentary impact into lasting trends, into lasting participation and lasting influence? And that is something I think we're all trying to figure out. And that's what I think is needed to support the kinds of activities that are implied by the Force for Good report that need to be undertaken in order to support those activities. So I do think it's a crucial issue, this issue of mobilization, of information, of education, and being able to reach people on a consistent basis with accurate and real messaging that allows them to hopefully participate in the issues they care about in an informed way. So that's one of the things I spend a lot of time on. And maybe just one other point, which is one of the things that I like very much about the World Investment Program report, is that it's very concrete. It's real things that can really happen and that can be understood not only at a level of economics, but at the level of individual humans. Humans can understand what it means to talk about getting educated, to talk about a seawall if they live in a coastal city or whatever. So it is very concrete and investable and apprehendable by the general population, and we need to take that fact that it is apprehendable and really get that out there in a way that provides people with an opportunity to become involved and to sustain action.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. I'm going to come back for more insights from you, of course. Osvald, you have a career in building enterprises that make an impact, and you are now applying that know-how and experience to catalyzing many others, enterprises that can make an impact. Can you speak about what it takes to do this at scale? So it isn't just the largest enterprises in the world, the largest corporations, but we ignite enterprises that really make a big difference.
Thank you very much, Ketan, and also thank you for your excellent introduction yourself. And it's a great honor to be with you. It's fantastic what the panelists here have been doing over the years and focus on now. So I, of course, also like very much the World Investment Plan, and in particularly three things I picked up. You see, I have this feeling and this experience now that we actually need to reinvent economic growth as we know it. We need economic growth that actually advances in harmony with nature. And we need to, I could mention so many examples. Just one small thing. I was putting up some fenders on my quay in Western Norway some time ago. And my beautiful brother comes along and he says, "Are you aware of this? That this is plastic. So this microplastic we will have in our fish in 2 generations." That's one thing that is so important with what you're saying. The second is that we definitely need economic growth that serves the many, not only the few. And one of my wake-up calls in recent times is we actually need to change the time perspective. A lot of people are running faster and faster in models and we don't see change. So yes, we need to deliver short term, but we also need to think of how we can serve what I say, the next 7 generations or generations to come. So I like very much that sentiment in the report. But I will be a little bit more, let me just mention a couple of examples. So I was sitting in Stockholm a little while ago with one of Europe's probably top investors. One of his recent ventures, he was able to raise 7 billion euros to invest in a green steel plant in northern Sweden. And during this dinner, he suddenly raises his hands and he said, everybody is saying there is so much money around, but where is it? And then a few minutes later, you listen to Ajay Banga, you listen to other very big institutions, and they say we have plenty of funding, we are just lacking the projects. So this whole system is deeply unproductive, and there will be a huge improvement potential in all of this. I also would like to mention one other thing. I'm coming into this call from Norway, and the days are getting shorter, the nights are getting longer here, and the winter is coming. And there's one thing we have learned over the many years here, that when skating on thin ice, speed is of essence. And we are on thin ice now, so we better pick up the tempo. And I have 3 suggestions for us to consider. The one is, how can we drive radical productivity and improve how we do meaningful bespoke projects? Like this project I just mentioned, investing in green steel in Sweden. It is challenged at the moment, but I believe with this excellent leadership that they will pull through. And when they start to produce green steel that way, it will reduce the carbon footprint for the whole country significantly. So that's like one example of individual bespoke projects. If you then look at the second example I would like to mention is radical productivity through systems transformation. We need systems to transform: the energy system, the healthcare system, the transport system, etc. And there is a very nice small example from my home country here. We decided some years ago to electrify personal transport. And the center-left local government joined hands with the center-right national government. And we decided to actually do this. And within a few years, like last year, 86% of all new registered cars were electric. And it has changed the whole picture, the whole experience of Oslo, actually. Now, another example which came through the mediums today is what Carney and Canada is doing now to really build a clean energy superpower in Canada. It's very interesting to study how precisely they have really risen to the occasion to drive the energy transition very, very ambitiously. Now, the third, those are 2 examples, bespoke and systems. And the third suggestion I would like to make is, I've been working quite a bit at Columbia University on blended finance. And you see, to take us into a safer space, we literally need thousands and thousands of, or like a large number of projects. And why is it, Ketan, you are in India at the moment?
Yes.
40%, I learned that a couple of weeks ago, 40% of the population in India cannot expect drinkable water, safe drinkable water in 4 years. So there is a sense of urgency that we really need. And this really comes down to individuals. It's not only like a big number for people to talk about academically, but it actually impacts lives. So my third is to truly understand how you finance, how you fund difficult projects, and how you bring in philanthropy, government, private equity, de-risk, as the professor mentioned. How do you actually do this so you can get projects off the ground quicker? So these are my 2 or 3 specific examples that I see we work on in everyday life. And if we can join hands and actually with your report and work, take our game to a higher place, it would be fantastic. Thank you.
Oswald, thank you. You've drawn together so many of the threads of what we've said. I'm going to actually go straight to Phoebe for that. And we're coming into the closing part. We have 20 or so minutes. So I'm just 3 or 4 minutes of deep insight on this, please. Phoebe, funding the world is not the lack of money. Right.
No. So if you, in the Global Climate Hub, this is a UN SDSN Global Climate Hub that works on developing exact and detailed transformation pathways for each and every country to reach the SDGs. And we call it ourselves Global Climate Hub because SDG 13 on climate is an all-encompassing SDG that affects all the SDGs. And there, what we do is integrated systems analysis that allows us to derive the dynamic changes and transformation, but also not only over time, but also across space for each and every country in the world. And when we are talking about systems transformation, we are talking about studying and delivering recommendations for the integration of the transformation in the energy system, the food system, the transport system, the marine system, the land use system, the health system. And then when you have the dynamic and spatial changes that need to take place in each and every country, you ask the question, how do I finance this? The how do I finance this? Countries with fiscal space is easier because these are countries where there is some fiscal space for public to use public money, and there is also willingness for private money investments, both in philanthropy and other private money. Now, the difficult case is the global south, but it's a serious case because this is where most of the population of the world is, and this is where extremely interesting opportunities exist because you have a lot to do in all these different systems that I referred to before. Now, there we need first to work on debt relief. Debt relief should entail at least restructuring of the outstanding debt, of the debt that we have now, because heavily burdened countries cannot get out of their poverty loop because the loans they get are not long-term enough, and the interest rate is too high. Until now, the international financial system burdens the developing country borrowers with an unjust and inefficient risk premium on their international borrowing, and pushes them to borrow at dangerously short maturities. It is too short to have a 5 to 10 year maturity, which is what, for example, the Eurobond is giving them. So what we really need to think hard about is how we restructure this global financial architecture in order to create global financing as a vital instrument of empowering these countries. And again, we have introduced many different instruments for this in the UN conference in Seville, for which we have worked many years up to now, and it's a accumulation of 10 years of work. We've introduced, and I will mention these 8 points very quickly, and there's integrated national financing frameworks, blended finance and hybrid capital, debt-related instruments and debt sustainability measures. We have introduced how official development aid and scaling up public finances can work, how we can use pre-arranged financing, disaster risk financing, innovative new revenue sources and financial tools, mainstreaming climate and resilience into public budgets and planning. We have the tools and we know what needs to be done. the global financial architecture can be restructured to the benefit of both the global north and the global south. And once again, we know how to do it, and the interest, the investments are immensely interesting.
Thank you. Thank you for your passion and all the work you do, Phoebe. I'm going to turn to John Symonds. John, you are probably unique, as I said, for many reasons, but one of them being you straddle healthcare and finance in your career. You've been a banker too, and you've been in one of the leading accounting and finance businesses too. What is stopping us mobilizing capital at large scale? What would unlock it? Because there's about $700 trillion worth of wealth. There's about $240 trillion in the capital markets, somewhat split, not quite evenly, but between debt and equity. It seeks profit, especially in this day and age. What do we have to do?
It's a really tough challenge, and I really like what Phoebe said in terms of the understanding the tools, and also what Osvald said in terms of new partnerships. I've spent the last 3 years in the UK on trying to transform the UK capital markets and to release, what is the second or third largest savings pool, on earth, and to release it, in particular, for scale-up projects, many of which are climate related. There is no shortage of capital, and there is no shortage, I think, of great ideas, tools, and technologies that are nascent that require scaling. But we've just got this.
That's right.
The magnets are opposing. They're not attracting. And the issue, as it turns out, is really one of education and risk appetite. People are poorly educated as to what kind of returns they need to sustain a long-term, financially secure life. And society has tried to remove all elements of risk, such that often, and I saw this at HSBC, the bank was the guarantor of everybody's problems. So, to try and tease this out, it's really a cultural problem. It's not, on the one hand, finding a marketplace where great technologies can be showcased and can be transformed, but also it's this willing appetite to deploy. Now, I think what Phoebe has said is really important, is that, and we've talked about this, is that if you've got the asset on one side and you've got the capital on the other, how do you bridge it? It is looking at how can public capital de-risk or underwrite some of the risks, so that there is a clear value proposition for private capital to come in, that it can secure a return. And I think we've tried to, public and private capital has competed when it really should be sort of aligning itself to allocate risk across the spectrum, so that each party can see what their contribution is, and ultimately private capital to secure an appropriate.
Oh, we lost John there for a second. Oswald, I'm going to ask you to step in for me, please, which is, you mentioned Canada, and some of the largest, sorry, John, we lost it for a second.
Leave it there, but I think, sorry about that.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Those are very welcome insights. Oswald, you mentioned Canada. It is also, just like as John Symonds said, one of the deep pools of money and expertise, particularly on energy, sits in Canada. Australia similarly has these pools of money. Japan has these pools of money. There are sovereign pools of money. There are examples all around the world of people of goodwill who wish to make an impact, who are driven to do so, but also driven by other priorities. What are you seeing that could be unlocked?
Yes, so that is the question that the large investors ask themselves time and again, isn't it? If you look in this country, the Norwegian fund is supposedly the world's largest sovereign wealth fund.
Absolutely.
And the parliament puts very strict investment principles. So there are limits to what they can do. I think what John Miller mentioned of popular support, I think still despite all the great work going on, there is still a huge urgent need to raise our awareness around the challenges at hand. We are really skating on thin ice, and we have to raise our game, and we have to think about those who actually, we have to combine a long-term view with a short-term action. And hopefully, I also find, my wife has been the Norwegian Minister of Energy, Minister of Culture, and Deputy Foreign Minister, etc. And I've been exposed for all these years. And it just also looks like people live in different circles, like they are preoccupied with their different businesses rather than coming together and to actually help solve big things. And if you look at of all the things that the professor probably mentioned, of all the systems, I think the energy transition is existential. That is really important to accelerate. And to answer your question, we basically need financial innovation. We need, like what John mentioned now, you need to de-risk the important projects, and you need to put together people who are able to actually shape these projects and make them investable. And that requires wisdom, but also technical skills, because it's absolutely true that there is so much capital and there's so much that people want to do, but it doesn't connect somehow.
Yes.
And then you have in some parts of the world very difficult regulations that is hampering the speed we need in many areas. And then, of course, you have human errors, which we have seen time and again, that is undermining our low carbon future. But I should probably stop there. I'm thinking of what has happened in Europe with exiting nuclear and doing these things in some of our beloved neighboring countries, and then you end up with more coal and more oil, and it's actually not helping us.
Oswald, there's so much to unpack in what you said.
Yes.
With no time to do it. But I'm going to say this too, which is every energy source we have today, even if people only believe, let's say, in uranium nuclear, or they only believe that actually it's solar and wind, these are all transition energies for the breakthroughs that we're now making. The magnitude of the breakthrough that took us from laptop computing or even minis and mainframes to AI and distributed computing today is a revolution that changed everything. And everything we have today, including oil, gas, coal, solar, wind, uranium, nuclear, all just transitions. And we probably aren't that far away as far as we think from these changes. But something else you said I'm going to come back to in the closing, which is that the initiatives. But I want to come to John Miller. John, you heard that the idea that we all have a role and we wear a hat, and that hat sometimes restricts us from working together. But we're all just people, and we have to be mobilized to make the best impact we can make in this lifetime for good. What are your insights on how we do that? Because we have the technology platforms that access everything and everybody now. How do we mobilize it for good?
Yeah. Yes. First of all, I think it's been an excellent discussion. I agree with the insights and so many of the positions that have been put forward here as to a way forward. And again, from my purview, we need to bring people along for that journey. We didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of where we are, so to speak, and to improve all the things we're talking about to the levels needed overnight either. So having a world population that understands more and is engaged more in this journey is really crucial to sustain the support, investment support, and other kinds of support, political, for example, that will be needed to get from here to a much better place over the next number of years. Again, it is not an overnight thing. So understanding the means by which we can inform and educate and use the platforms that are out there is a key part. I don't think it's an adjunct part of these discussions. I think it's actually very much embedded in these discussions and these initiatives that need to be undertaken and should be thought of as in that way, not as for example, a press release that you do after you've thought about something else, but very much how do you embed in your project the whatever constituencies you believe you have, the way to bring them along for the journey. And just might cite one thing. I don't know if folks have seen it, but the Edelman organization, which is a communications company, does an annual report on trust around the world, and the 2025 report was eye-opening. We've hit, and I'm going to end on a positive note, but before we get there, we've hit on a global basis. It's many decades survey, so it's benchmarked over the years and globally, and I believe 30 countries or more, maybe more. We've hit new lows in trust in our leadership in government. On a global basis. We've hit new lows in the level of optimism that people have around the world. And there's both a surge in fear and grievance throughout the world's population. These are not the conditions for which the things that we are discussing will likely be sustained and successful. And so again, we need to mobilize using the platforms and mediums that exist to change that. But, and here's where we end on at least my remarks on a more optimistic note. Interestingly, while trust in government and other institutions has declined precipitously, the most trusted institutions now are in fact business. Business is itself the most trusted institution. And so we must use the types of things we've been discussing here, public-private partnerships. Absolutely. And the right things to have business be a leader in our way forward. And as we've discussed, that can be done profitably with existing technologies now. And that is a new set of conditions that we've never had before, where all of those things can come together.
Thank you, John. Thank you. There's some surprises in what you said too. Thank you. It's good to have business be the good guy at some point in this story too. For everybody else, just as we wrap up, just 1 minute on what do you see as your closing remark on how we push the agenda of development and climate together forward. John Symonds, please.
Well, I think the big message that I've got from this is to inspire and empower people. I completely agree with what John said about trust in business. The value proposition of people that come to work for us, and I know many other organizations, is because we do the right thing for people and we do the right thing for communities in the world that we live in. And I think we really, really need to empower people to expect governments to do that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Osvald, let me ask you to go next.
Yes, I would just like to say that I just published a book and the title is Hope for Life on Our Planet, Inspiration for 7 Generations. And I think there is hope for life on our planet, but we really need to pull our socks up. We need to come together as a human family and invest our time with what yields the highest return. And I totally, to inspire people, to support people, is not old-fashioned. It just needs to be taken to a new level, both in terms of, there is something to learn from this election in New York recently, how language suddenly turns around everything. And we need to think through how can we advance a language that brings people with us faster, you know. I think that is something to think about, and for you, John, to teach us, John Miller. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Phoebe.
Well, within the developed world, it's obvious that if you study the value chains of any company, you can identify the trade-offs and the synergies that make the green and digital transition profitable. So for me, that is easy. With regards to the developing world, we economists say that convergence is conditional on effective governance in the borrowing countries. So we need to urge intensive capacity building and skills training to enable and empower all governments to plan for their long-term development, manage fiscal policy, and international indebtedness. So what we actually need to do is fight corruption, implement public investment plans and public services with diligence and excellence. And we also need a formation of borrowers clubs of nations, like we do have creditors clubs in the multilateral world, that will allow us to foster proper domestic institutions, fiscal rules, regulatory practices, and in this way achieve long-term sustainable development. And as the chief scientist of the UN on the implementation of the SDGs, the Global Sustainable Development Report that the UN is bringing forward every 4 years, let me just say that we also need precise, quantified metrics on the cost of capital, the maturity of loans, the returns on equity, the performance on the sustainable development goals, and multidimensional vulnerability, so that commitments are tested rigorously against real action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Phoebe. I'm just going to close the session by thanking this panel. Thank you for your passion and your insights, and really probing yourselves to come out with the things that might actually help us. It was a year, I'd like to remind as well, we lost Jane Goodall, who was an exemplar. I was privileged to be on her legacy foundation and to work with her and to know her. But she was a wonderful example to us of somebody who bridged the environment and people and was global and relentless at it. I hope we will find the projects that we spoke about that are of such scale and magnitude that we can all make an impact. But I finish with the idea that every individual, regardless of how much you might like them or not in the world, is a potential powerful force for good. And it is time for each of those to step up and make that impact, each of us to do so too. Thank you very much to UNFCCC for hosting this opening session, and best wishes for the many sessions to come and the impact that you will make.
Thank you, Ketan,
Thank you
and
very
all
much.
the panelists for a very wonderful session here at our first session of UGIH. So we'll close this session now, and we'll resume at 10:30 with our next session of Innovation Hub. All of you are welcome to join us at 10:30 in the same room, which is a session on leveraging innovation for developing innovative climate and sustainable solutions, which will feature Minister Radovan from German Federal Ministry of BMZ. So you are more than welcome to be here at 10:30. See you then. Okay, thank you very much, all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.